everyone, and welcome. My goal for this video is to hit 200 miles per hour. Now here's the deal. I'm in the influencing business. I know that's a disgusting word. I hate it, but that's what they say. And so as an automotive influencer, one of the questions I commonly get is, what's the fastest car you've ever driven? And the thing is, I've driven a lot of really fast cars. I've been very fortunate to drive a lot of really, really sweet cars. However, the fastest I've ever driven was in a Hyundai. And look, I can't be going around telling people that the fastest I've ever driven was in a Hyundai. I can barely say the sentence because it's like, dang, a Hyundai with all these opportunities you've gotten? So, we're here to change that. I am sitting inside of a McLaren 720S Spider, and I am at the Sun Valley Tour de Force. So here's how this works. I've got a McLaren, I've got 3 miles of open road. What could go wrong? You got to hit 200 miles per hour. Sounds easy, right? Well, it's not so simple, and for 2 reasons. So we do have 3 miles of public road that's going to be shut down for us to use. However, really it's only, the first mile is a blind corner, all right? So you're going through a blind corner for the first mile, then you've got 1 mile of straight, that's where you hit the speed trap, and then you've got 1 mile to brake. So we're really cutting it down to 2 miles to get it all done. And that first mile, again, is a blind corner. So when McLaren asked, hey, Jason, what car do you want to do this in? I said, how about the Speedtail? And they said, hey, Jason, what car do you want to do this in? So I said, all right, what are my options? So they said McLaren 720S, they said McLaren 765LT, and they said McLaren Artura. And I thought, okay, of these, my ultimate goal is to hit 200 miles per hour. So which one of these 3 cars do I think I can do it in? And as far as top speeds, the 720S does have the highest top speed, 212 versus the other 2 are at 205 miles per hour. What I was more concerned with is how quickly do I get there? Because you don't have unlimited space, and once you start to get to about 150 or so, you run out of road really quickly. Things are moving fast. So I want something that can get up to 200 as quickly as possible. The 765, that's a car with a lot of downforce, slightly slower top speed, so I thought, I probably will have better luck reaching that top speed in the 720S. So that's what I have chosen to go with. Now, this is Engineering Explained. I'm not simply here to brag about this cool experience and what I'm getting to do. We're going to do a little math, right? So that means it's time for a little whiteboard action.
All right, this looks pretty awful, yeah? Yeah, so we're not going to spend too much time on this, but I want to provide myself with some solid excuses in case things don't go my way. Because very small changes in atmospheric conditions can create big impacts on whether or not you actually reach 200 miles per hour. So we have a McLaren 720S, we have 710 horsepower to deal with. How much of that horsepower do we actually need in order to hit 200 miles per hour? Well, we can do the math and figure out that that's about 433 kilowatts, or about 580 horsepower. So that's great, right? We've got plenty of extra, 130 extra horsepower in order to actually get this done. We're trying to hit 200 miles per hour. All right, but the location we're doing this at is pretty high up. It's got high elevation, about 2,000 meters or about 6,500 feet. So what impact does this have? Well, air is less dense at higher elevation, so this is actually going to help us with aerodynamic drag. So instead of our air density being about 1.225, our air density is going to be 1.007 kilograms per meters cubed, which means our drag is going to be reduced by about 73 kilowatts or 98 horsepower at 200 miles per hour, meaning we only actually need 482 horsepower instead of 580 in order to hit 200 miles per hour because we're at this higher elevation. The problem is there's a direct correlation between air density and how much power you can make. So if we take a ratio of our air densities, we get 82%. So if we multiply 82% by our original power, 710, we get 583 horsepower, which is just slightly above what we need in order to reach 200 miles per hour. Now, this would be true if this was a naturally aspirated engine. However, thankfully, this 720S has a turbocharged engine, so elevation doesn't have quite the the same impact. So if you're at sea level and this engine wants 30 psi of absolute pressure within that manifold, well, you've got 15 psi from the atmosphere because you're at sea level, and then you add 15 psi with boost with the turbocharger. As you go up in elevation, say you're at 2,000 meters, well, you've got 12 psi of atmospheric pressure. It's lower, about 80%, but you can add more with your turbochargers to still maintain that absolute pressure of 30 psi. It's not going to be the same efficiency, it's not exactly perfect, but you can compensate for that elevation and make more power. Now, what if it's hotter outside? Well, hotter air is less dense, so that means we're making less power. Now, this is actually quite complicated. It's worthy of its own video. But if you look at some of the equations out there and give yourself a nice estimate, that means we're going to lose about 23 horsepower if we were to go up just 20 degrees Celsius. So from 15C to 35C, as the day heats up, you could lose about 23 horsepower, meaning you're now at 687 instead of 710, just from that simple 20-degree difference in air temperature. All right, so what if we have a little bit of wind? And I really mean just a little bit of wind, just 10 miles per hour, nothing crazy. 10 mile per hour tailwind, meaning going with the car, so our relative airspeed at 200 miles per hour is going to be 190 miles per hour. Well, that means we're going to basically have 59 kilowatts or 79 horsepower less that we don't actually need. So we only need 501 horsepower instead of 580 in order to make that 200 mile per hour happen. But what if the wind is going against us, just 10 miles per hour, meaning our relative airspeed 210 miles per hour? Well, that means we're going to need an additional 65 kilowatts or 87 horsepower, meaning 667 horsepower in order to reach 200 mile per hour. And look, this is getting extremely close to how much power we have. So if we just have a slight headwind, it could mean this is impossible. All right, I feel like I've given myself now sufficient excuses in order to not hit 200 miles per hour. Let's get to it. Okay, so let me just preface this run by saying I was definitely scared, and I didn't expect to actually hit 200 miles per hour. I even texted my wife saying exactly that, because it turns out driving fast is a bit terrifying. And mind you, this isn't about the car. It's planted at speed and incredibly capable. It's about the unknowns. What if I get a tire blowout? What if an animal pops out of nowhere? What if a patch of dirt causes me to slide? And truthfully, the biggest factor, am I confident enough to even push the car to 200 miles per hour? Will I keep my foot down on the throttle, or will I get scared and lift out of fear? That was genuinely my largest concern, because above 150 miles per hour, if you start looking around, it's frightening. Your body knows it's too fast, and your brain, which wants you to pump the brakes, is pumped with adrenaline. So let's kick this off. I'm giving the thumbs up and it's go time. Modest throttle initially, there's no need to launch, and then bury the throttle once we know we've got good traction. Even without launching, I'm at 100 miles per hour in less than 8 seconds. Continuing to build speed, I enter the corner in 5th gear. Fear creeps in and I lift a little bit, still accelerating but much more slowly, but I ease back into it. So by the time I've exited the corner, I've been flat out for a good while. Then it's simply eyes up, foot down, and keep it relatively centered. Any natural movements, I tried to just let the car go with it, but again, keeping it towards the middle. And boom, right there, the magic moment happens. My poor choice of camera angle means we don't have the full speedo, but we can see the beautiful 2, as in 200 miles per hour, 35 seconds into the run. But we're not done yet. The McLaren still has more in the tank, as I ride the throttle all the way to the car's limited top speed of 212 miles per hour, with the speedometer reading 213. It chills here, with the engine holding steady as everything around me violently passes by. The finish line arrives, I lift, gently ease onto the brakes to get speeds down to something reasonable, and yeah, I've done it. Holy I've done it. 200 miles per hour. And like a true nerd, I say VMAX.
VMAX! Wow!
So a few comments on this. I actually got to do 2 runs, and it was exciting for the second run to not have any pressure, knowing I'd already hit 200 miles per hour. The corner is really intimidating, even if it looks really casual on video. I came out of it on both my runs at about 170 miles per hour, which made reaching the top speed possible. Also, what I found to be the easiest way to remain calm was to look as far ahead as possible. The further you looked out, the less you noticed how quickly everything around you was moving, which keeps you pointed in the right direction and keeps your heart rate slightly lower. Now, these are stiffly sprung cars, so it's a little bumpy, but honestly it didn't feel bad, and watching the footage back, it looked mildly more chaotic than it felt. Something I did find interesting as I looked at my eyes checking the speedometer, the glance from eyes up to eyes onto the speedo to eyes back on the road was a 0.4 second round trip. In those 0.4 of a second with my eyes off the road, I traveled 124 feet, or nearly half a football field. I'm traveling an entire football field in distance every second that passes by. As someone who's never experienced this, it's difficult to describe how bonkers fast this feels. Also worth mentioning, my second run later in the day took a lot longer to reach 213 miles per hour on the speedometer. Why? I'm told there were times with 10-mile-per-hour headwinds, and also temperatures had risen significantly, meaning it's now harder for the engines to make as much power. As we've learned, both of these factors can play a big role in top speed. Another fun fact, on my first run, the speed trap recorded 259 miles per hour. And while it was wrong, it does technically mean that I have the highest speed read by the speed trap at this event, even beating the previous record set by a Bugatti Chiron of 253 miles per hour. The speed trap was recalibrated for my second run, and the speed trap, speedometer, and GPS all indicated well over 200 miles per hour, which was my original goal. And I'm going to keep telling myself I hold the record, technically. Now, I need to give a huge thank you to the entire crew making up the Sun Valley Tour de Force. They're super professional, keep things safe, and have eyes all over the roads during your run to make sure nothing is going to obstruct your path. The slightest disturbance, whether it's some brush blowing onto the road, or an animal, or even an influencer trying to get too close to the roadway for a better video shot, and they called a run. Radio in your ear, you slow to a stop, and reset. It certainly helped my confidence to have these safety measures in place.
Now, just driving this thing on these beautiful roads, this is a really special car. It's incredibly fun. It's well planted. It gives you confidence going at these crazy speeds, and it's got a little bite to it too. It's got a little wild side to it, which I like. So it's been a blast. Beautiful scenery, cool looking cars. I've just had so much fun out here. Thanks to McLaren for having me out here. Let me check this out. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below.